Chapter 5. Guilt Comes Home to Roost. I took a certain pride in having been a nest liner of such quality that none of the young had succumbed to sickness. I heard Ma and Pa Crow talking of some of the other crow families and came to the understanding that raising 5 young and not losing any is rare in any avian community. Summer was now in full swing. The young had by now lost all of their fluffy down, and had fine, shiny black feathers not unlike their parents. They were growing quickly. Although still smaller than their parents, the nest was beginning to feel too small for all 7 birds to sleep at night. On sunny afternoons, the young hopped up to the rim of the nest, flapping their wings in practice, all eagerly competing to be the first to achieve flight. Ma and Pa Crow were obviously proud of their young, I could tell. The long days of summer were filled with activity as the young wrestled with each other and practiced flapping their wings. It was always such a commotion that I never had time for a thought of my own. Once, when Ma Crow had left the nest for a short while, the young ones picked me out of the bottom of the nest and tossed me around such that I feared that I might fall out of the nest altogether. They pulled me with their beaks, even played what seemed like a game with me where the 2 biggest teamed up against the 3 smallest, and each team pulled at me trying to drag the other team over the center of the nest. I felt lucky to be a sock, as I felt no pain, but I could feel that the young birds were gaining such strength that surely it would be soon that they would fledge. Emily should be proud of the excellent choice of yarn she made, and of her needlework. There I was, almost 7 years old, a red wool sock, and still tough enough for a nest of young crows. Ma Crow returned to the nest and scolded her children and set me back in place with care and deliberation. She cocked her head to look askance at them. Although they didn't say it directly, I felt that she was although she didn't say it directly, I felt that she was conveying to them that I was a very fine sock, not to be toyed with. I remember the day, not long after that, that the biggest of the young, whom I believe to have been the hatchling of the first egg, stood tall on the edge of the nest, with a look of determination that I had not seen before. That warm summer morning he raised his wings and held them steady. He squatted low, wings still spread. Then he sprung with his legs and flapped his wings and rose from the nest. For a second he hovered in place. Then he began to drift out away from the nest, and then he disappeared from view. He cawed from a nearby tree, apparently having safely perched. He cawed several times, trying to encourage the others to join him. The 4 other young crows stood together on the rim of the nest, looking out to their brother. They seemed afraid to go. From the floor of the nest, I could not see where their brother was, but he cawed once. He cawed once more and then flew off. I heard his voice trail off into the distance. The next morning, the second hatched stood on the rim with the same proud look in her eye as her brother had the day before. She flapped her wings, gained balance, then sprung, hovered, and then she too disappeared. The morning after that, the third hatchling left the nest the same way. It was as if an internal clock ticked off the milestones of the young crow's development to the day. The clatter of the remaining 2 was of perplexity and dismay, as if to ask, why would they want to leave home? What is she doing? It's dangerous. This desire to leave the nest, to fly away, lay as dormant as a seed in the young birds, It is as if they were completely unaware of this desire until that seed of inspiration sprouted. But when it did, the force of that desire was irresistible. I watched in amazement as each successive young crow awoke a different bird than had nestled down to sleep the night before. What had been a timid but playful chick one day awoke brave and self-assured, confident, full of dreams of faraway lands, a new bird ready to take on the world, and nothing would hold him or her back. During this period, both Ma and Pa Crow left the nest before dawn. I don't know exactly where they went, but I think not far. Of course, I could not see them, but I could feel their presence nearby somehow, deep in my fiber. I suppose they stood off, watching from afar, not wanting their young to feel supervised at this moment. Then there came the last young crow, the smallest of the clutch. On his last night in the nest, he'd been distraught, feeling around the nest for his siblings and not finding them. Both Ma and Pa nestled with him, trying to soothe his anxiousness. They knew they had coddled him some, but they seemed to know that in the morning he too would awake a new bird. He would fledge as the others had. He would not feel lonely again after this night. It was the way things were. Sure enough, the morning came. Ma and Pa left the nest. This time, however, I could feel that they had not gone far. I could again feel their presence, this time closer than I had for the other fledglings. To tell the truth, I believe that they're actually quite concerned about their youngest son. Nature is full of examples of bad endings for such youngsters as he. But they knew there was nothing else to do but wait for the change to come to him and hope for the best. The youngest crow awoke alone. This day was cooler than before. A thin fog clung to the hillside on this windless pre-dawn. The tops of the tall pines around him stood as dark forms whose trunks faded into gray mist. Then the sun broke the horizon, sending a sheet of gleaming light across the forested ridge, cutting through the prism mist. This bird, the youngest of the brood, stood now in his moment, perched on the edge of the nest as his siblings had. But to him now, the times of watching childlike while they had flown off, seemed like 100 years ago, a different life. He looked out upon the spectral wonder before him, where gauzy rainbow mist rose up the hillside and dissipated into blue sky. He stood, the spirit seed within him having bloomed, and with an unstoppable desire to take to the sky. At this moment I realized that this was not unlike the spirit that had come over me when I had to escape. Yes, I had left to escape my life as a sock. But it occurred to me, as I watched this young bird, that there was another, more noble side of my desire to escape. Like this crow, I also had an uncontrollable desire to jump into the unknown. And I didn't have wings. The last young crow held his beak high, gave himself over to this new calling, hopped into the air, flapped with silent grace, rose high over the nest. He ascended in great circles until I could only see him as a tiny dot in the sky. Then he began to descend until I could see his form again as an adult crow, flying with confident dignity. He made one more pass over the nest, I like to think for the purpose of saying goodbye and thank you to me. Then he disappeared. I can remember no silence as silent as the hours that passed that morning after the last young crow had fledged. The absence of distraction brought yet another uncomfortable bout of introspection. I asked myself again who I was, and had to remind myself that the proper question would be what I was. Was I a sock? Yes. But what is a sock without its partner? Nothing. Nothing but a long strand of yarn elaborately tangled. I didn't want to contemplate that. I had moved on. I had made my decision. I had to live with the consequences. I could say that I had become something else, a part of something that gave me purpose. I could not be denied that I was, or it could not be denied that I was part of this nest. I was part of a crow's nest. That's what I was. I could add that it was literally a lofty post. I worked hard to define myself as something with a purpose, and for those who have not engaged in such labor, let me tell you, it is not an easy thing to do, especially if your efforts are mocked as pretense by every stitch of your being, always there to remind you that you are simply a single sock. In the end, I could not escape that what I'd done to my partner, to Emily, and even to Henry in leaving had come home to roost. Ma and Pa Crow returned to the nest in the afternoon. They'd come back with a strip of venison. Someone must have hit a deer on the highway. I suppose they'd hoped it to be a festive meal to celebrate the successful fulfillment of their parental responsibilities. But they ate quietly. I was glad that they took care to remove the bits of deer fur. As evening grew, they nestled down on me. Ma Crow adjusted me to cover a stick that rubbed her uncomfortably. I could always feel the appreciation she had of my quality in the gentleness of her beak. She never ripped at me violently, always gently. The next morning, Ma and Pa Crow flew off together. They didn't come back for 2 days. Then they came back, but only stayed a few hours. Then they left again. I knew what they were doing. They were searching for the group. Of course, they'd find it, and I would be alone. I was beginning to understand the patterns of the seasons in Ma and Pa Crow. Summer's heat baked me in the nest while they were away. I don't know how much I've faded since the young crows left. I had not appreciated the shelter they'd provided me from the hot sun. I'd been so distracted and entertained by their antics. But now they were gone, and Ma and Pa Crow were also gone. I suppose they're doing whatever it is that crows do for fun. The days dragged on, and as comfortable a perch as a crow's nest is, it became a lonely place for me. I found that I do not take to solitude well. Then the first cool winds of autumn came. Ma and Pa Crow did not come back any more. Of course, they'd found the group. They would not be back until spring. I knew I should have been grateful for the relief from the heat, and the time to myself, but I wasn't. The physical comfort only allowed the full weight of guilt and loneliness to bear down on me without distraction. I had to face what I had done, and to be honest with myself about what I'd become. I was alone in the wilderness, adopted by a family of ravens. No, I shouldn't say that. They are crows, and there is a difference. And they were nothing but kind and caring to me. I'm sorry for having said that. But anyway, that is what I was. That is what I was. Just an old sock in a bird's nest. Somewhere. I. It was it. Okay. But anyway, that is what I was. Just an old sock in a bird's nest. Somewhere. I brought it on myself. I left my partner to its fate with Emily and Henry. I had to ask myself, would I do it all again if I could go back in time? I don't know. The days dragged by. I had nothing to mark the time. I could not mark the days without food. Socks do not eat and do not become hungry. I found that with nothing else to do, looking at the sky provided me with an activity. I'd learned that there were names for different kinds of clouds. Sometimes the moon and clouds danced with each other. Sometimes it rained. Here's the picture that goes along with that. Lonely time after the crows had left. Okay, that's the end of chapter 5.